Hey everybody, and welcome back to my channel, where today we are going to be taking a look at my March DNFs. So as I am filming this, it is halfway through March and I've already DNF'd 3 books, and just kind of like how I've been feeling and what I'm looking at reading, I suspect that we're going to have even more. And so I decided to go ahead and pull my DNFs out from my wrap up into its own video. So we are going to go ahead and start with my very first DNF of the month, and that is Chosen Ones by Veronica Roth. This is an adult superhero story. Essentially, we're following these 5 characters who 10 years ago were tapped to basically like train because they had the potential to become the Chosen One and defeat the Dark One. And 10 years ago, they, as a team, did actually defeat the Dark One. And now in present day, things are happening that are very strange and give everybody pause about, like, is the Dark One coming back? And the Chosen One group kind of has to deal with it. So I actually made it really far in this book. I DNF'd it at page 215. So originally this was actually really interesting and exactly what I wanted it to be, in that we were following this group of very broken characters. They lived through some traumatic nonsense with their training, with trying to defeat the Dark One. It absolutely makes sense that they have a lot of stuff that they have to deal with, and some of them are dealing with it better than others. And like, it was exactly as I wanted it to be in like the first 75 pages, and then it kind of went off the rails as they were sucked into an alternate dimension. And the problem here was that I was all on board for them to have to face the Dark One again. Like, if that's where the plot line went, like, I was totally on board for that, because they would be doing it as adults instead of teenagers, and they would be doing it as like kind of like people who are not at their 100% best and have a lot of trauma, and it was trauma induced by this guy. That has a lot of interesting ways that it can go. And so I was not prepared for them to get sucked into an alternate dimension and have to like deal with that dimension's Dark One, or I don't know exactly where we were going to go. Maybe it was the same Dark One. We don't actually know. But I was just like, this isn't really what I wanted. And like, we had done all this story building for the alternate, or for the dimension that our 5 chosen ones are from. And then we had to do a whole bunch of other world building for this new dimension, which I didn't actually find all that interesting. Like, I didn't want to do it in the first place, but I didn't find it that interesting. Additionally, not the entire groups get sucked into the alternate dimension. And the 3 characters that we have of them, I liked one of them and I specifically disliked 2 of them. So I was not feeling it. Like, there was a lot of stuff where I was just like, I'm kind of halfway interested to see how this goes, but I don't think I'm interested enough to read another 200 pages. One thing, there are 2 other notes, by the way, that I want to make sure that I mention. First off is that, and this is something I did somewhat struggle with, but I was more understanding than like other reviewers have been, is these 5 characters are more or less emotionally stunted. A lot of this stuff was happening when they were teenagers. They didn't have a normal childhood, and then they had trauma on top of that. So they are emotionally immature, and so because of that, it does kind of read younger than like a full-blown adult novel. There are other reasons why it reads younger as well, but specifically related to the characters, I actually do think it's pretty understandable, and you just kind of have to go in knowing that these are emotionally immature characters for a reason. And then I do also want to note there's a ton of trigger warnings in this, so be cautious going in. But yeah, with all of that together, I DNF'd it at page 215, and while I still am curious to see how things go, I'm not curious enough to read the last 200 pages of it. And then my second DNF is Heroine's Journey by Sarah Kuhn, and this is the 3rd book in the Heroine Complex series, which is an adult superhero stories, another superhero story. I've been reading a lot of them lately, but essentially in this series, we're following this group of women, two best friends and a younger sister, who all have superpowers, and they're trying to be superheroes, be good people in their own right. They're finding themselves in each one person in each book. So this is actually the younger sister, Beatrice's book, and this was in some ways, this was kind of a mistake to pick it up in the first place, because the series has a lot of good things, but there was a lot of stuff that just wasn't working for me. And I especially, like, the writing style wasn't working for me, and some of the choices in the plot wasn't working for me, and some of the choices with the character was not exactly what I wanted. And there was some issues with quality, but honestly, even if it was like really well executed, I don't think that I would have loved the first two books, because it just was like going in directions that I didn't necessarily love. So like those first two books I read, I wanted to like them so much, and I just kind of didn't. But I kept telling myself I still want to give this third book a chance, because I've been really interested in Beatrice as a character. I want to go inside her head. I made it 24 pages before I was like, actually, I don't want to be inside Beatrice's head. She's not my character. She's a much better side character than she is to, like, for me personally. I found her much better as a side character than actually as the main character. So like I said, this may have been a mistake to pick it up in the first place, because I did have such mixed feelings about the first two books, enough that I was already thinking that I was probably just going to read this book and then DNF the series. So I maybe shouldn't have picked it up, but in many ways I actually am glad that I am glad that I did, because I think that this is one of those rare series where I would have wondered, what if? You know, I felt so strongly about wanting to try Beatrice's perspective that I think that if I had not at least tried this book, I would have always wondered, but what if this one was actually exactly what I wanted it to be? But because I tried it, because I DNF'd it so quickly, I can just walk away from this series feeling very good about my decision to DNF the series. So yeah, unfortunately, I knew that this probably wasn't going to work for me, but it's still sad that it didn't work for me. And then the next one is Like You Love Me by Adriana Locke. This is an adult contemporary romance. We're following our main characters of Sophie and Holden. Sophie is in this small town in Tennessee, and she runs a bed and breakfast, and she is facing some very serious financial problems, and she may not actually be able to keep her bed and breakfast. Enter Holden, who is living there temporarily, basically to help out with his granddad's veterinary clinic. Sophie and Holden were friends as kids, because Holden would come visit during the summer. And they decide to go ahead and get married to help each other out. Basically, Holden is going to take care of Sophie's financial problems, and Sophie is going to be there to show this prospective employer that Holden is trying to, like, get a job with, that he is responsible and stable and all of that kind of stuff. So it's a mutual benefit. And then of course sparks fly. Look, this is another one that if I had actually thought about it, I probably wouldn't have picked it up in the first place, because, like, here's the thing. Married people are not inherently more responsible, nor are they more stable. And unmarried people are not inherently unresponsible or unstable. And any employer that uses that criteria for job candidates, you should run away from. That is just something that I feel very, very strongly about. And so, like, even though, look, this is a small town romance, we all know what's going to happen in the end, that Holden's probably going to get offered the job. He's going to turn it down so he can stay with Sophie. Like, we know how this is going to go. And yet I'm still just like, run away. And so it was really not fun to read that. I also just generally, with the writing itself, I think that there wasn't enough done to establish the chemistry between these characters. It relies very heavily on this, like, childhood friendship, but we don't actually see the childhood friendship. So I don't think that was done particularly well. So it felt kind of just flat. And between those two things, I decided to go ahead and DNF it at page 47. Again, maybe shouldn't have picked this up. I'm more okay that I tried this, but yeah, like it's very unfortunate. And then the next book is It Wasn't Always Like This by Joy Preble. So, this is a young adult fantasy where we're following our main character, who is part of a community who accidentally drank from the fountain of youth. And so, everybody in the community stopped aging. And pretty much, as far as I can tell, immediately the Church of Light decides to go after this community and manages to kill the vast majority of the members. The only survivors are our main character and her boyfriend. Fast forward to present day, she has managed to stay out of the clutches of the Church of Light, but they are kind of circling in much closer to where she is. And she doesn't know where her boyfriend is anymore. And the story kind of goes from there. This is a book that I DNF'd very quickly. When I first picked it up and I started reading it, I had like some minor quibbles with like the writing style and that kind of thing, but I pretty much rage quitted because of the world building at page 12. So essentially, our main character's younger brother in the first chapter drinks some benzene, which I think is a paint thinner or a paint stripper or something. It is poisonous, whatever it is. But we are told that basically the younger brother drinks like half a jug or something, and then he looks green for a little bit, but then is fine. Like green for a minute and then is fine. So it's just like, okay, I mean, like they did drink from the fountain of youth. They're like immortal, basically. I understand that. But in the very next chapter, our main character is drinking a lot of alcohol and is able to get pretty drunk. And then she wakes up with no hangover. So it's just like, no, I mean, like that doesn't work with biology. Like that's not how that works. Make it make sense. And so like between that I knew that kind of stuff was really going to bother me, but also like with all the other little quibbles that I already had going, I just decided to go ahead and DNF it. And then the next one that I DNF'd is Seven Devils by Laura Lamb and Elizabeth May, which is an adult science fiction, and it's basically like supposed to be the super feminist space, a crew of all women who are helping this rebellion kind of thing. And I did read the first 51 pages before I DNF'd it, but it wasn't for me. That's what I'll say. So in these first 50 pages, we do get two different perspectives. The first is Eris and the second is Chloe. And Eris, I was actually pretty good with. Like, I thought she was a fine character, but I didn't really like Chloe. Chloe had this, really hates Eris, and we kind of like discover why. And I think the author was going for kind of trying to incite these specific emotions in the reader, but just didn't necessarily do a very good job of it, because by the end I was just like, okay, I mean, I understand why you don't like her. I understand even why you kind of understand why you hate her, although we didn't get enough information about that, but you're both part of the resistance, so get over it. Like, I mean, that's where I was. Like, I didn't really think that she was justified in her actions. And so because of that, I really just didn't like this character. And so I stopped at page 51 because, like with the last book, I did have some minor quibbles with it. But also, even though I know we get more perspectives as the story goes on, I also didn't want a main character that I really just didn't like. And because of that, it kind of gave me more neutral feelings towards this book of like, I mean, it could be fine. But then thinking back to some reviewers who I trust talking about this book, it was very mixed reviews. It was very much it's fine, or like, I had some issues and here's what they are. And so I don't know that the ending is actually going to be worth it to try to get through my kind of meh feelings I've already got going. So I went ahead and just DNF'd it at page 51. And then the last book that I DNF'd in the month of March is Repo Virtual by Corey J. White. And this is an adult cyberpunk story. We're following our main character of JD, who is a repo man in virtual space, which is so cool. Like, that's such a cool concept. It's great. But essentially he is asked to pull off this heist, and it's like against this like really wealthy individual, so very high security. Only JD finds out that what he's stealing is the first sentient AI, and the story kind of goes from there. And this is another one that I DNF'd actually fairly quickly. I only made it to page 19, and that's because the writing was not working for me at all. Like, the whole point of the opening chapter is that we're in virtual space with JD, and it's not necessarily that you're supposed to know you're in virtual space, and then these like weird intrusion kind of things start happening, and then you start to realize, oh, he's in the virtual space, and these intrusions are things that are happening in real world. Except it wasn't done well. So that was the problem. Part of it was the like descriptions and stuff were not done very well. So it was very hard to understand all the different pieces fitting together. But then these intrusions weren't really written very well. And not even just like how they were introduced, but like the actual sentences lacked clarity. And so by the end of the first chapter, I was just like, I don't really want to fight my way through this, especially this is another one that has gotten some very mixed reviews. So I went ahead and just DNF'd it. So that is it. Those are all 6 books that I DNF'd in the month of March. If you have any thoughts or feelings about any of the books that I mentioned in this video, please leave me a comment down below. But that is all I have. So if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. And until next time, have happy reading, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.